Hello, this is Eastern Europe Reivew, a joint production of BELSAT and TVP World with reports and analysis from Ukraine, Belarus and Russia. I'm Alexandra Shapalina and these are the main stories. Russian authorities insist on the Ukrainian link in the Moscow terrorist attack despite widespread disbelief. Ukrainians modify old Soviet weapons for use in drone warfare.
We've got a lot of Soviet mines in our warehouses, so we use them as standard ammunition for drones.
Interviews in Belarusian penal colonies as an additional torture for political prisoners and their relatives.
It's obvious that this is a performance, a sordid staging.
The fire at Crocus city hall near Moscow had barely been extinguished when representatives of the Russian authorities began loudly asserting that Ukraine was behind the terrorist attack. However, as events unfolded, their claims became increasingly less convincing and their statements less confident. Will the Kremlin continue to insist on the Ukrainian link, or will another version be put forward?
The terrorist attack in Moscow on March the 22nd has already claimed the lives of at least 144 people, with around 100 more still missing. The Russian authorities are attempting to channel the anger of Russians sparked by the tragedy at Crocus City Hall concert venue towards blaming Ukraine for the incident.
This atrocity can only be linked to a whole series of assassination attempts by those who have been fighting our country since 2014 at the hands of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime.
And although ISIS has claimed responsibility for the terrorist attack and afterwards published videos filmed by the attackers themselves during the attack, the head of the Russian Security Council, Nikolai Patrushev, has no doubt about who is guilty of the tragedy. FSB director admitted that the mastermind of the terrorist attack at Crocus City Hall has not been identified. However, at the same time, he expressed the opinion that behind the terrorist attack were no less than the United States, Great Britain and Ukraine.
This is general information, but there are already certain developments.
The head of the FSB added that a window had allegedly been prepared for terrorists on the Ukrainian side of the border. However, he did not specify which window he was referring to, considering the fact that the border between Russia and Ukraine, embroiled in conflict, is one of the most heavily mined and guarded places on Earth.
What kind of corridor could there be, if in fact Russian border guards are stationed on the Russian side? Or do the Ukrainians already know how to set up corridors on the Russian side?
Even the Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko indirectly refuted the version of the Russian special services. On March the 26th, he stated that the men accused of the terrorist attack were moving towards the Russian-Belarusian border.
There, the FSB reported to us that they were moving in our direction along this road, and Putin and I immediately agreed that we would block this section of the road.
Meanwhile, the Federal Security Service admitted that they were aware of the threat of terrorist attacks. They actually acknowledged their own failure.
We responded to this information and took appropriate measures in order to prevent such actions. We do everything we can on our part, but we are not limitless in our capabilities.
A week after the terrorist attack, the statements of the Russian authorities sound less and less confident. The head of the Investigative Committee of Russia, Alexander Bastrykin, said that the perpetrators of the terrorist attack allegedly received money from Ukraine, including crypto wallets. His words sound extremely unconvincing. In the absence of competent communication between the authorities and society, conspiracy theories emerge.
I think the most popular version among people now is not ISIS, unfortunately. People rather ask, didn't the FSB carry out this terrorist attack themselves? Because we all see who benefits from it. The beneficiary within the country is Putin, with his idea of declaring mobilization. It is clear that Putin did not organize this terrorist attack, but the way he behaves reveals him to be the main beneficiary.
Could the FSB have actually organized this terrorist attack? Experts believe this is highly unlikely.
If Putin tried to organize this terrorist attack in order to do something, then we would have already seen why he is doing it. If this were a pretext for general mobilization, then we would have already seen it. But we now see that basically there was no political reaction, apart from some meaningless and helpless statements about the involvement of Ukraine, which are based on some complete nonsense, some fictitious corridor on the Ukrainian border.
The problem is that Putin needs Ukraine to be behind the terrorist attack in Moscow, despite the fact that the Russian president himself and his associates understand that this is not the case. This is why the Russian authorities will continue to insist on a probably false but convenient version.
They want to take advantage of the situation. The thing is that ISIS is an understandable enemy for Russia. The FSB has been working against ISIS for many, many years. And it fights ISIS and introduces its agents into ISIS and has sent extremists from the North Caucasus to ISIS. They think they can handle ISIS, but taking advantage of the situation to blame Ukraine is very important for Putin. Putin really wants to win this war and is looking for opportunities to consolidate society.
The question remains whether Russia is now ready to open a second front and begin the fight against ISIS, while it is already waging one full-scale war against Ukraine.
Ukrainian soldiers are adapting obsolete landmines and grenades from the 80s to create ammunition for drones. My colleagues have visited a warehouse where an ordinary anti-tank mine received an unexpected modification.
This footage shows a Ukrainian drone known as a vampire, or as Russian soldiers refer to it, a Baba Yaga, according to prosecutor, commander of the attack UAV unit of the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The drone is capable of carrying more than 10 kilograms of explosives.
It's a powerful vehicle, capable of carrying up to 15 kilos of payload. We've learned to counter electronic warfare with a few tricks of our own. In other words, the drone is very effective against electronic warfare equipment because of its sophisticated settings and equipment installation.
This is what a munition drop looks like from the perspective of a Ukrainian pilot, 1 kilometer away. A combatant known by the call sign dentist makes the explosives for a drone. Previously a dental surgeon, he is now working as an engineer.
It's like pulling out a patient's tooth.
The improvised workshop for upgrading mines and grenades for drones operates in a 10-square-meter room. Dentist explains that a lot of ammunition from the 1980s is not suitable for direct use, so he has to adapt it for drone deployment.
We've got a lot of Soviet mines in our warehouses, so we use them as standard ammunition for drones.
The pilots of the 30th Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces are stationed near Bakhmut, where the Russian army uses numerous drone suppressors. Consequently, multiple drones are required to effectively hit a single target.
If 1 out of 3 hits the target, then that's an excellent result.
Hundreds of FPV drones sit on wooden shelves. Before sending them to units, specialists inspect the drones thoroughly, soldering wires, tightening screws, and programming them.
We need to make some changes if there's a different attachment or if something is missing. We have to modify it slightly to make it behave predictably in flight.
In the background, the noise of 3D printers can be heard, operating around the clock to produce shanks and frontal pieces for ammunition. Prosecutor mentions that thanks to the commander of his brigade, it has been possible to assemble a team of specialists to manage drone supplies and the production of explosives.
We've got a competent and effective brigade commander who clearly understands the importance of this field. He also provides me with the necessary support to implement innovative ideas and concepts.
It has been reported that in the direction of Bakhmut, where Ukrainian soldiers from the 30th Brigade are holding the line, there will soon be 3 Ukrainian drones for every Russian combatant. This increase is due to the rapid production of attack drones and the expanding production capacity.
Interviews with the state media in Belarusian penal colonies serve as an additional form of torture. For 3 months, relatives of Polina Sharenda-Panasiuk received no information about the political prisoner, when suddenly propagandists of the Lukashenko regime aired a half-hour report about her. The activist and mother of 2 children has been held behind bars for more than 3 years, and this interview could become a requirement for easing the conditions of detention.
Lukashenko's TV channel Belarus 1 aired material about a political prisoner, Polina Sharenda-Panasiuk, during its primetime evening broadcast. There had been no news about the woman from the penal colony number 24, where she is being held since January. The propagandists accompanied their video with a mocking caption, "ATN journalists have found Polina Sharenda-Panasiuk."
Although she was asked about how she was feeling, there are great concerns about her health based on the way she looks there. That's the first thing that worries me and has really shocked me, seeing how much her appearance has changed during 3.5 years.
On March 19th, the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women called on Belarus to take temporary measures to protect the politically imprisoned Polina Sharenda-Panasiuk. The reason was the inhumane conditions of the woman's detention. She was beaten, placed in solitary confinement, denied visits, and contact with relatives. She frequently lacked access to hygiene products and warm water, and she had to sleep on the cold floor. In the so-called interview, the propagandists forced the woman to deny the poor conditions of her detention, as well as criticize the Belarusian democratic forces and compliment Lukashenko.
It's obvious that this is a performance, a sordid staging. Polina walks there on an absolutely empty territory. There is no one except her and the propagandists. The kind of residential room to which she is taken, in fact, isn't residential. You can see that it's just been renovated.
In the TV material, propagandists show Polina a video of her family, from which she has been separated. At that moment, the woman bursts into tears. It is known that while in detention, Polina was even refused to receive pictures of her children.
From Polina's voice, and I know her very well, it's clear she is constantly reading the text that was given to her. Her voice sounds as if she was reading a fairy tale to a child. And those manipulations, which they didn't even hide, with showing her pictures of children, are torture. What's happening with Polina is torture.
In the summer of 2021, Polina, a social activist of European Belarus, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for allegedly insulting Lukashenko and acting against the national security of Belarus. Later, while already in prison, her term was extended twice, reportedly for disobeying the administration of the penal colony. During her imprisonment, Polina was held in solitary confinement dozens of times.
Among women, such torture in Belarusian prisons is applied only to Polina. Only last year, she spent 220 days in solitary confinement. And this is real torture. It's cold, you're hungry and completely lonely there.
Polina was supposed to be released in May this year, but the penal colony's administration informed her relatives that in the past 2 months, the woman had been placed in solitary confinement as a form of punishment 3 times. This was cited as the reason for yet another extension of her imprisonment.
This means that a new criminal case was ready. Polina fell into a vicious circle of torture and understood that only through an interview there is a chance to break out of it. She decided to play their game, and I can see that she passed this exam with dignity.
In the so-called interview, it was revealed that Polina Sharenda-Panasiuk signed a pardon request addressed to dictator Lukashenko. Allegedly, her participation in a propaganda video was made a prerequisite for the opportunity to meet her family after more than 3 years of imprisonment.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching Eastern Europe Review. We will be back next week with the news stories. I'm Alexandra Shapalina. Keep watching TVP World and see you next time.